in our community.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. To the crowd.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're great. Thank you, Steve. Lots of help here. I've been good about recording, but not this Sunday. Anyway, so before we want to take advantage of the time that we have. We've got a lot of questions that I think we may have, but it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Sahar Sahar Kamis, who will be helping us uncover and counter misunderstandings about the teaching and the practices of Islam that have been used to foment Islamophobia. She'll be also as she does this, she will be dispelling myths. And her background is incredible as associate professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Maryland, College Park, an affiliate professor of women's studies, and an affiliate professor in the Consortium on Race, Gender, and Ethnicity, a media host, international media commentator and analyst, and former Human Rights Commissioner in the Human Rights Commission in Montgomery County. She's the current president of the Arab U.S. Association for Communication Educators and the chair of the Spiritual Communication Division at the National Communication Association. With that, I welcome you, Sahar. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thanks for the kind invitation and thanks for organizing this adult education series and my talk. I really appreciate it so much. I am always, holding the Bradley Hills Presbyterian Church community very dear and near to my heart. I had the honor and pleasure of speaking to this community in the past, and I'm so happy to see my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Andrew Wolven, among the audience, as well as my friend, Dr. Pat Stocker. It's great to see you all, and thanks again. So my topic today is going to be about countering Islamophobia, one fact at a time, the role of education and media literacy. So what are some of the common definitions of Islamophobia? I trust that some of you have definitely heard the term Islamophobia before, but I want to start by saying that the idea of fearing a certain group of people because of their culture, belief, or because they are different is not a new phenomenon. It has been around for centuries. This process of ethnic, racial, or religious profiling has been commonly referred to as stereotyping. So stereotyping is old. Maybe the term Islamophobia is relatively new. Therefore, it could be said that Islamophobia, which is characterized by an exaggerated sense of dislike and hostility towards Islam and Muslims, is a new word for an old problem. The book, The Politics of Islamophobia, defines Islamophobia as an increasingly visible backlash against Muslims across Europe and the United States. And the term backlash, of course, in this case, encompasses all negative acts and messages against Muslims. Under this definition, we can clearly maybe also highlight some of the bodily acts of harm, some of the physical, mental, emotional, and psychological harm inflicted upon members of the Muslim faith. And maybe one example would be the cartoons, which were very much defaming and very much negatively profiling the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, that were drawn by a cartoonist in Denmark, if you remember this incident back in 2006, and it drew a big wave of negative emotions and feelings among the Muslim communities worldwide. The book Islamophobia, Making Muslims the Enemy, states that Islamophobia reflects the largely unexamined and deeply ingrained anxiety among people in the West when it comes to Islam and Muslims. And the Gallup website offers one of my best and most favorable definitions of Islamophobia, which is an exaggerated fear, hatred, and hostility towards Islam and Muslims that is perpetuated by negative stereotypes resulting in bias, discrimination, and marginalization and exclusion of Muslims from social, political, and civic life. So all of these are different definitions of Islamophobia. Sean Armstrong as well says that this is part of thinking about Islam and Muslims as bringing about some kind of fear in the hearts of others, especially the fear of losing life or liberty to Islamic rule. Maybe the best example I can offer here is this weird claim that Muslims are going to have their own quote-unquote Sharia towns or Sharia zones, which of course is a very ridiculous claim because there is no such thing as a Sharia zone. Any Muslim who lives in a non-Muslim majority country abide by the rules and the laws and the constitution of that particular society. So there is no such thing. So when we gave all of these definitions of what is Islamophobia and how it has been defined, we have to ask ourselves the compelling question: what are the causes of Islamophobia? And the fact is, this is an equally complex issue. There have been different explanations for it. One of them is fear of immigrants. I'm sure you've been hearing this discourse in the media. Immigrants are dangerous. They're going to come here. They're going to take our jobs. They're going to take our opportunities. Our society is going to be less safe and all of that. There is also the discourse of the West versus the rest, or the clash of civilizations. Oh, we cannot coexist together. It's either me or you, but it cannot be we, both of us coexisting together in the same space, which is a very dangerous mindset. There is also the lack of understanding of the Muslim faith and the stereotypes imposed on the entire population of the 2 billion Muslims worldwide. And that's where the role of the media comes in, as we're going to talk about it in a moment. I believe that one of the main and primary causes of Islamophobia is ignorance. Human beings are always fearful of whatever they are ignorant about. And it could be said, therefore, that the major cause behind Islamophobia is indeed ignorance. And this highlights the importance of focusing on education to combat Islamophobia and all other forms of hatred, bias, and discrimination. This includes both formal education, which takes place in schools and colleges and other formal institutions of education, as well as informal education, which takes place in community centers, clubs, public spaces, and places of worship. Indeed, this adult education series is an example of this informal education, which is most needed. Both types of education are very important and they complement each other, and they're definitely needed to combat Islamophobia and other forms of hatred. Here are some visual examples. As we all know, as they always say, the picture or the photo speaks 1,000 words, or it's better than 1,000 words. You have seen some of these marches and protests, especially in Europe. No to Islam, stop invasion, stop the mosque, Islam is the new Nazism. A lot of this kind of Islamophobic rhetoric, unfortunately, has been sweeping, especially some of the European and Western capitals. And according to a Gallup poll, globally, many Muslims report that they do not feel respected enough when they're living in Western countries or in non-Muslim majority countries. And also some of the non-Muslims agree with this perspective. 52% of Americans and 48% of Canadians say that the West does not respect Muslim societies sufficiently. And a smaller percentages of Italians, French, German, and British respondents agreed with this kind of assumption. So it is kind of sentiment among the Muslims, but also among the non-Muslims as well. So what are some of the common myths about Islam and Muslims which need to be dispelled? I think the first one is Islam is a violent religion. Unfortunately, there has been this negative association between Islam and Muslims and terms like terrorism, extremism, radicalization, and others. Well, in fact, the term Islam comes from the word salam, which literally means peace. And the sweeping majority of the 2 billion Muslims who live on this planet are peaceful people. Those who commit acts of terrorism or violence are a very, very small, tiny fraction of the Muslim community. A second myth, Islam does not tolerate freedom of belief. This is a very big myth because the Quran, the Holy Quran, which is the Muslim holy book, says whoever wishes to believe can believe, and whoever wishes to disbelieve can disbelieve. So there is definitely a protection for freedom of belief. Another myth, Islam discriminates against women. Well, interestingly enough, there have been rights offered to women more than 1400 years ago under Islam and Muslim rule that women in today's modern world, including in the West, did not achieve yet, such as the right of the woman to divorce herself, her right to economic independence, to property ownership, to education, to employment, and to all other types of participation in the public sphere. However, unfortunately, these are unknown facts about Islam and Muslims. Another one, which is one of my favorites, Islam and feminism are mutually exclusive. You're either a Muslim woman, a devout Muslim woman, or a feminist. I always write about Islamic feminism, and I say that it's very possible to be a feminist who talks about gender equity within and under the umbrella of your Muslim belief and Muslim practice. I do not see them as mutually exclusive, as long as you're always fitting your own feminism and your understanding of it under the umbrella of your own faith, not outside of this umbrella. Islam and democracy are mutually exclusive. That's another myth. Oh, you cannot be a Muslim and have democracy at the same time. It's either or. Well, one famous Muslim, cleric once said, if you think Islam and democracy do not exist together, it means that you don't understand Islam and you also don't understand democracy, because the principle of shura, which means consultation, dialogue, taking multiple views into account, has been a Muslim principle more than 1400 years ago. Another myth, which I always tell my students in my Arab media class at the University of Maryland, Arabs and Muslims are the same. I always say, not every Arab is a Muslim, and not every Muslim is an Arab. Not every Arab is a Muslim, because we have Arabs who are Christians, Arabs who are Jews, Arabs who are Maronites, Druze, and members of other, religious communities. And not every Muslim is an Arab. In fact, the largest Muslim country in the world is not a Muslim country. It is Indonesia, which is not an Arab country. So we have to always think about these distinctions, that Arabs and Muslims are not always the same. In some cases they are, but in other cases they're not. Muslims are newcomers to America or newcomers to the West. This is not true, because Muslims were among the very first builders of American society. They were among the first wave of immigrants who came to the United States, in some cases, unfortunately, compelled migration, enforced slavery, as we all know, but they were among the builders of this society. Female genital mutilation is an Islamic practice. It is not. It is an African practice that has seeped into some Muslim majority countries, but not others. So there is nothing in Islam itself that says that women should undergo this kind of terrible phenomena. This has been an African practice that seeped into some Muslim countries and not others. Honor killing is an Islamic practice? Absolutely not. There is no such thing in Islam as killing a woman for any reason, or killing any other human for that matter, actually. That, again, is a terrible practice that started from some tribal and Bedouin communities and has been unjustly associated with Islam and Muslims. Therefore, it is very, very important to distinguish between religion and tradition. A lot of the things I've been talking about now fit under the umbrella of tradition. Honor killings, female genital mutilation, discrimination, gender inequity. A lot of that fits under the umbrella of tradition, but not religion. And therefore, it's very important to make this distinction that many people, unfortunately, do not make. And it's also important to understand some of the wrongly understood terms like jihad and sharia. I'm sure you all came across some of these terms in the media, when the media spokesperson and his guests or her guests do not even understand what these terms mean. So jihad, which has been in some cases associated with violence or aggression or war, simply means struggle. And every one of us have their own type of struggle that they engage in on a daily basis. And the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, said the greatest struggle, the greatest jihad you can always launch is the jihad or the struggle against your own self and your own desires. That's the real meaning of jihad in Islam. The word Sharia, which has been again used as a form of Islamophobic term, they're going to create their own Sharia zones, be careful, these Muslims are coming. In fact, it simply means the way, the path. And in the case of Muslims, it means, for example, how they handle their own personal matters like marriage, divorce, and all of that. And when you're living in a non-Muslim majority country,
listening to my Sunday school class, but go ahead. I'm just.
Jesus, would everyone please mute yourselves?
Shall I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. So the Sharia means the path or the way. And for Muslims, the Sharia is the code of practice, which means how you worship, how you pray, how you deal with your own personal family lives like marriage and divorce and others. And of course, if you're living in a non-Muslim majority country, you will have to abide by the laws and the rules and the constitution of that particular society in many of these matters. So these are some of the myths that I would like to dispel about Islam and Muslims, and I'm sure that you can also do your own reading and your own searches to find out more about these terms and how they have been inaccurately understood and distorted, unfortunately, especially in the media. So that brings us to my area of expertise, which is the Western media and how it has been, in many cases, part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So I shared my PowerPoint with Carol. She can share it with you. And the very first icon here is a video. We don't have time to play it in the interest of time, because I prefer to have a lively discussion with all of you once I finish my presentation. But you can definitely click on this link and go to the URL and watch the video, which is called Representation of Islam in the Media. And you will see for yourself that the misrepresentation has not just been in talk shows and drama and movies, it has also been in things like video games where the Arab character or the Muslim character is always the villain, the bad guy, the evil guy. The same thing about cartoons and comics. You know, even in a beautiful movie like Aladdin, it is loaded with Islamophobic terms and loaded with bias and discrimination and terms which are completely negatively profiling Islam and Muslims, despite the beautiful, artwork that is presented to us. And that's why we love Aladdin, but we have to pay attention to the underlying messages as well. So many mainstream American media and Western media at large spread negative images, distorted stereotypes, and sometimes hate speech against Muslims, linking them to acts of violence, extremism, and terrorism. Although the Pew Research and Gallup Research proved that 96% of terrorist acts committed on US soil are committed by non-Muslims. So if there is any act of terror, 96% of these are committed by non-Muslims, especially by right-wing white supremacist groups. Unfortunately, these are not the groups that you hear about in the media, and that is intentional. The wide outreach of these media venues and their immediate instant transmission magnified their impact on many audiences. This in turn resulted in an escalation in acts of violence and hatred against Muslims in the US and Europe as well, including attacks on mosques, Islamic centers, and women who are wearing the hijab, which is the Muslim headscarf, like myself. That especially became, of course, very prevalent after 9/11, as I'm sure many of you know. This is also coupled with a narrow focus on terrorism in mainstream media, which is linked to the principle, when it bleeds, it leads. This is one of my favorite points. When it bleeds, it leads simply means that the media is very interested in conflict, bloodshed, war, killing, destruction. Whenever these things happen, they make the front page headlines. But something like what we are doing today, engaging in an informative session, dialogue, informal education, the media is not that interested, because it does not fit the principle, when it bleeds, it leads. And as you can imagine, that cultivates an image of a very scary and dangerous world. Also, terrorism studies started to become very prevalent in a number of big universities and institutions of learning, and negatively seeing Muslims from this very narrow lens of terrorism, rather than seeing them as average mothers, fathers, teachers, nurses, doctors, you name it. So that brings us to a very important concept, the importance of media literacy. Acquiring the needed skills to navigate both traditional mainstream media, such as television, radio, and print media, as well as new digital media, such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter or X, is absolutely essential for the fight against Islamophobia and all other forms of hatred, bias, and discrimination. The ability to distinguish between facts and fiction is very important. What are the facts and what are the myths, just like we're trying to do today? And to tell the difference between credible news and misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation, of course, being the information which is, accidentally mistaken. It is not intentional, but disinformation is intentionally and deliberately distorted information. Very dangerous, like in the case of spreading lies and propaganda. And all of that, of course, could be very dangerous in all cases, and especially to Islam and Muslims. It is essential, therefore, to have media literacy skills, in my opinion, which are taught from K to 12, as well as higher education, and definitely in informal education settings, just like the one we are having today. We cannot afford to be media illiterate. We have to try to educate ourselves about how the media works in order to be able to distinguish between facts and fiction and between credible news and misinformation and disinformation. What about the internet? The internet and Islamophobia, that became a double-edged sword in my opinion. Interestingly, the surge in Islamophobia sometimes serves as a double-edged sword. You'll be surprised to know that. For example, the wave after 9/11 definitely created a lot of bias, prejudice, and discrimination and hate crimes against Muslims. We all know that. But on the other hand, it also increased interest in learning more about Islam and Muslims to an unprecedented degree. And it increased solidarity with Muslims in some cases as well. I can tell you for sure, I was hired at the University of Maryland, College Park in 2007 under a special search for an expert on Middle Eastern media. That was the kind of search I was hired under. And that was very much becoming a pattern across many different institutions, paying more attention to Islamic studies, Arabic studies, Middle Eastern studies. So that is the silver lining in this dark cloud. There has also been some solidarity for sure, and we should be fair in saying that. For example, with the Muslim Travel Ban 1, Muslim Travel Ban 2, that banned people from 6 Muslim majority countries from coming into the US. We have seen people from all walks of life, Christians, Jews, white, blacks, Latino, you name it, coming out in solidarity and in support of the Muslim community, which was really beautiful. Likewise, we can argue that the internet, with all of its unfiltered content, can sometimes harm Muslims and negatively affect their image and reputation. One example is the campaign known as #BanIslam, as the name suggests. It was a very Islamophobic campaign that tried to discriminate against Muslims, and it was really difficult. It's really impossible to stop this kind of content from infiltrating digital media. You cannot do it even if you want to, because it's an open space for everyone. However, the internet also offered unique and unprecedented opportunities for Muslims, especially young Muslims, to respond and react to all of these efforts using the very same digital tools and techniques in cyberspace. So in other words, it's a double-edged sword. You can use it to spread Islamophobia, but you can also use it to combat and counter Islamophobia at the same time. Some examples of successful online campaigns. For example, we have seen the Unity Production Foundation release a YouTube video. I'd love for you to check it out at your own free time. American Muslims, Facts versus Fiction, which dispels some of the myths and misconceptions about, American Muslims. Oh, they're newcomers to the US. Oh, they're really radicalized and extremist. Oh, they're all Arabs. All of the myth we have been talking about previously. So this is a very interesting video. I would love for you, please, to watch. There are also other forms of campaigns, such as the campaign #WhyIslam and #DiscoverMuhammad, which became very popular campaigns, both online as well as using billboards on the streets as well. Here are some examples. Looking for the answers in life, discover Muhammad, and then they give you the website and the information for this particular campaign. Also here, who is Muhammad? You got questions, you can get answers. Why Islam campaign, again, using billboards and using websites at the same time. And this one is of special relevance to you. Jesus, the peace and blessings of God be upon him, a prophet of Islam, right? Now, a lot of people do not know this fact that, Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, and Virgin Mary, peace be upon her, are very highly respected and revered characters in the Muslim faith. In fact, the whole story of the immaculate and miraculous birth of Jesus Christ is narrated in details in the Holy Quran from beginning till end, and his life story, as well as the story of Virgin Mary. In fact, there is a whole chapter in the Holy Quran called Maryam, which is Mary in Arabic, and there has been no other woman at all who has been, given this kind of honor, and she's been described as the most highly respected and revered and honorable woman ever to exist. So these are facts about Islam that not very many people know, but it's important to know the status of Jesus Christ, the peace and blessings be upon him, and Virgin Mary, peace and blessings be upon her, in the Muslim faith. And that was part of this campaign. And I think the campaign also has been successful in combining both the online, digital, technology or strategy with the billboards, because not everybody is online because of different reasons. Therefore, it has more of an outreach when you combine both the billboards and the online websites. Other examples of successful online campaigns to counter Islamophobia, to counter the Islamophobic campaign we talked about before, which is called #BanIslam. Some young Muslim activists started to go online and they started a campaign called #MuslimRage. Of course, the word rage would imply anger. But what these young people did is they turned it into a very satirical, very witty, very humorous thing. So they said things like, if you are in the airport and your son's name is Jihad and he runs away from you, don't you dare shout Jihad, Jihad in the airport, #MuslimRage. Or if you get on a flight and your friend's name is Jack, don't you ever scream, "Hi, Jack," on the flight, #MuslimRage. So they turned the whole thing into a very humorous, funny campaign. And as you can imagine, people loved it. It went viral because through humor, we can say things that we cannot say otherwise. So instead of saying, "Oh, these Muslims are angry people, they're like that," no, we are just ordinary people. And guess what? We are going to make fun of how ridiculous Islamophobia can be. Another famous successful example was a campaign by Muslim American women from different backgrounds and different walks of life. And they launched a campaign called #CanYouHearUsNow to respond to the attacks on Ms. Khizr Khan's wife, Mrs. Ghazala Khan, who stood in 2016 in the Democratic National Convention. She was silent on stage when she saw the image of her martyred son. So she was, they said she's silent. This is the quote unquote silent Muslim woman. Maybe she was not allowed to talk and all of that kind of stereotyping. So the campaign was an attempt to counter the negative portrayal of Muslim women as silent, weak, oppressed, invisible, and all of these negative associations, and to show that they have a strong and loud voice and that they speak in a very loud voice. So they started to run this campaign on Twitter, which is now the X platform, to show their own identities and raise their own visibility and voices. And here is an image from this campaign on Twitter. Muslim women ask, "Can you hear us now?" And as you can see from this particular image here, these women really do not fit one single criteria. There are women who are white, black, brown, wearing the hijab, the Islamic headscarf, not wearing the hijab or the Islamic headscarf. And that is the true reality. The reality is Muslim women are also very diverse. They do not fit under one single criteria or one single monolithic image or picture or criteria. They're very diverse as well. And that is one thing the campaign wanted to communicate. And the other thing was Muslim women have agency and they also have a voice. For example, one woman would say, "I am a professor. When I walk in the classroom, I'm the only one who is allowed to speak. #CanYouHearUsNow." Or, "I am the CEO of a big organization. When I start a meeting, I'm the only one who's allowed to speak. #CanYouHearUsNow." So you can get the sense or the gist of it. Other successful online campaigns which used humor very effectively was #MuslimsReportStuff. This saying, "Oh, when you see something, you should say something," that became particularly pressing in the case of the Muslim community, and Muslims were called upon. "Oh, if you see anything in your community, if you see something which is not right or not normal, you have to report it right away." So of course that is Islamophobic in its own right, because it assumes that there's something always wrong or suspicious happening in the Muslim community. So Muslim young activists started the hilarious, witty, and humorous campaign, #MuslimsReportStuff. A woman would say, "I've seen my husband doing the dishes this morning. Suspicious activity. #MuslimsReportStuff." Something like that, and my mother cooks the same soup every single day. I'm reporting her to the FBI. #MuslimsReportStuff. My brother never makes his bed. His room is always a mess. I am reporting him to the authorities. #MuslimsReportStuff. So as you can tell, they're trying to say, "Hey, we're just humans. We live a life just like everybody else. We're normal beings. There is nothing quote unquote suspicious going on in our community that deserves to be reported." And they try to communicate that in the most funny and humorous way. Other successful campaigns where Muslims are speaking out, which was a series of videos presented online to actually say very clearly that Muslim scholars, preachers, intellectuals, professionals, journalists are all speaking up against terrorism. We sometimes get the question, oh, okay, Islam does not accept terrorism, so why aren't Muslims saying it? I always say Muslims have been saying it and saying it and saying it, but they have not been heard. People do not listen to them when they keep saying that over and over again. You had very big marches in London that started, with huge numbers of Muslims across all walks of life speaking up against extremism and terrorism. Was that covered by the media? No. Did it get international visibility? No. Right? So I believe like it's intentional. So I actually participated in this campaign, hashtag Muslims are speaking out, and I recorded my own video, a short video just saying, we are Muslims and we are all speaking out against terrorism. Terrorism, radicalization, and extremism has no place in Islam. So this is an attempt to make our voices heard for the rest of the world. Another effective campaign, which was also very funny, was the Islamophobia pill campaign. Islamophobia, of course, trying to mimic basically ibuprofen or any other type of medication, which says that if you have any signs of Islamophobia diagnosed as excessive, irrational fear of Islam and Muslims, you should start seeking the healing cure of the Islamophobia pill. Try to take it 3 times a day until your symptoms are cured. If they're not cured, try to visit the closest mosque or Islamic center. So this is the Islamophobia campaign, and this is what the Islamophobia pill looked like. And it says here, this is meant to actually fight the symptoms of hatred, prejudice, bigotry, and Islamophobia. And take two pills and call a Muslim in the morning in order to overcome the symptoms of Islamophobia. And then it says at the bottom, Islamophobia is funny, but Islamophobia is not. So it's trying to remind you again of the messaging that Islamophobia as a campaign is meant to be funny, but Islamophobia as a threat, as a danger, it is not definitely funny. Also here, what is Islamophobia? Again, it tries to fight the symptoms of blind intolerance, bigotry, irrational fear of Muslims, and all of these other things that really impact Muslims in a negative way. And the story of Islamophobia is the belief that a little humor can go a long way. And with Islamophobia on the rise in the US and other parts of the world, what better way to help dispel the bigotry and stereotypes about Islam and Muslims than through satire and humor? So help us to shoo away Islamophobia by sharing Islamophobia with everyone you know and get yours today.
Good luck. Have fun.
Get yours
Sorry.
today.
Yeah, mute yourself. I don't know how this happened.
You're gonna have to do it on the other computer and
Yeah.
the participant.
Oh, no, I'm a co-host.
You're a
It's all right.
co-host,
I'm a
okay.
co-host. So,
Can I continue?
yes, please continue.
Yeah. So help us,
Apology.
no worries. Help us chew away at Islamophobia by sharing Islamophobia with everyone you know and get yours today, right? So that was, again, you can get the gist of it. Again, the use of online digital strategies and the use of humor to try to counter Islamophobia. So what are the goals and objectives of all of these campaigns? First, to combat some of the negative and distorted media stereotypes and misrepresentations about Islam and Muslims. To fight the sweeping generalizations about Islam and Muslims through resisting the view that there is only one monolithic Muslim identity, culture, or lifestyle. As I'm sure you know, Islam stretches all the way from Indonesia, Malaysia, to Morocco, and then you have the diasporic Muslim communities in Canada, the US, and Europe. Are they all the same? Absolutely not. I have Muslim friends who dress like me, dress more conservatively, dress very liberally. I have those who are very practicing, those who are not practicing, you name it. Just like any other community, I believe we have our own diversity. We cannot speak of just one single monolithic identity or culture. Also to promote better understanding and genuine awareness about Islam and Muslims. And we talked about the importance of education, media literacy, using the internet, using other types of media outlets in order to promote better understanding and to dispel the myth and the stereotypes about Islam and Muslims. To resist the gender profiling of Muslim women in particular by emphasizing their strength, courage, resilience, empowerment, voice, and public visibility, right? So oftentimes when you see the word Muslim women circulating around, oh, you think of a woman who is covered in black from head to toe. You cannot see anything except her eyes. Maybe she is just confined to the home. She does not go out in public. How about all of these Muslim women who are very active in their own Muslim majority countries and also in their diasporic communities as well? We need to see these and to talk about their identities very loudly, to highlight the similarities and overlaps rather than the differences and distinctions between Muslims and non-Muslims. This is a very important point because oftentimes the media, when it plays the game of when it bleeds, it leads, and we have the clash of civilizations, the West versus the rest, it's either me or you. It is hard to talk about what brings us together, right? What do we have in common? And the fact is, what we have in common and what unites us is much, much bigger than what divides us. That's the reality. The commonalities and the similarities are much bigger than the differences and the distinctions, but the media would like us to believe the other way around. Also, to use humor effectively to achieve all of the above goals. You've been smiling and I heard some laughs in the room because absolutely you can say things through humor and laughing and joking that you cannot say in a serious conversation. It can be very painful if you say it in a serious conversation, but you can get the message across through humor, and that has been very effectively used by young Muslim activists in these online campaigns. So, my final word. An important point to bear in mind is that we cannot understand the phenomena of Islamophobia as a detached or separate process from other interrelated ongoing phenomena such as xenophobia, racism, white supremacy, sexism, anti-Semitism, and other forms of discrimination, prejudice, and hatred which have been on the rise recently. In other words, Islamophobia is just one aspect, one example of all of these interrelated forms of danger and threat which have been unfortunately on the rise recently. Therefore, we have to talk about them. And I know you're going to be having a rabbi soon speak in your own adult education program, which is great. We need to hear all of these diverse voices in order for us to stand in solidarity together against all of these forms of discrimination, bias, and hatred. Having this broader outlook on this important issue enables us to contextualize it within the broader framework of multiple forms of injustice, and therefore facilitates coming up with innovative strategies and solutions to combat these ongoing multiple challenges collectively and holistically in a well-coordinated and well-orchestrated fashion. We cannot fight the Islamophobia. We cannot fight. We cannot fight the Islamophobia battle all by ourselves. We do need our allies. We need allies from the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, the Druze, the Maronites, the people of no faith, people across the globe. We need to stand together in solidarity in order to fight all of these different forms of injustice, hatred, and bias, including Islamophobia. So I always say justice is not just for us, it is for everyone, and therefore the struggle is ours, and we have to stand with and for each other in order to achieve these important goals, bearing in mind, of course, what Martin Luther King once said, that, darkness cannot fight darkness, only light can, and hatred cannot fight hatred, only love can. And with that, I end. Thank you so much, and I'm ready to take your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, as usual, what we can take questions from folks who are here present at the church, but also if you have a question and you're remote, if you could post it online, and then we'll recognize you. Does anyone here want to begin with your questions? Han?
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Kamis.
Walaikum salam.
My name is Han, and you're a member of this church. I'm immigrant from Indonesia. Nice to meet you. Thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, with regards to your And I agree with the intersectionality of this particular phenomena. Islamophobia cannot be divorced from other racism, xenophobia. I was wondering if you could perhaps talk more about the power dynamics. And I would explain it, I would preface my question by saying in my context, part of the reason I immigrated here, again, just part of it, is because of, you know, churches in my country getting burned down and such. Also, this is not in, when we talk about India, for example, it's the Hindus that are fighting the Muslims, or in Myanmar, you know, so I was wondering, or in Malaysia, you know, they're still kind of trying to figure out whether they can even use the word Allah and Baitullah. But I guess my question is, how much of this is a power dynamics between the majority versus the minority versus actual hatred of the religion across the world? Yeah, I guess that's my question. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum.
Yeah, alaikum assalam, thank you. For all of you, the word salam alaikum actually means peace be upon you. And it is the greeting of Islam. So I always say like salam alaikum, like peace be upon you is a greeting of Islam and greeting also for all the peoples of faith. Thank you so much for this important question. And I think that you really kind of gave very good examples that speak to this phenomena. And the phenomena here is intolerance, right? Religious intolerance that in many societies, and that is a sad reality, we are still suffering from the problem of intolerance, that the majority would like to have more power, would like maybe to dominate the minorities, in some cases not give them enough visibility or enough rights. That has been a historical challenge. It's not a new one. Just like stereotyping and bias and discrimination have been historically existing. We're just talking about terms like Islamophobia emerging to the surface, right? But the phenomena itself is not new. And the same thing I would say is applicable to your question here about different forms of religious intolerance. When you have a majority not accepting or not maybe accommodating the minority, and I think you gave more than one excellent example. It can happen in Muslim majority countries against non-Muslim minorities, or it can happen in non-Muslim majority countries against Muslim minorities. And I think you gave a number of brilliant examples you know, across the board. I think the solution, again, if you're looking for a solution for these complex and unfortunate and sad phenomena, definitely will go back again full cycle to the importance of education, awareness, and knowing each other and accepting each other as well. In societies where you have a higher level of literacy, education, openness, democracy, this phenomena is less likely to happen. Like I went to Singapore, you know, people are all treated pretty much equally the same. You know, Muslims, non-Muslims, I've seen people across the board from different religious denominations. I did not feel like there was any kind of distinction or difference in how they're being treated or their rights to worship and so on. So whenever something like that happens, of course, it's very unfortunate, but unfortunately, it has been an old phenomena, not a new one, and it exists across the board. And I think the word power dynamics that you used is a very accurate word. The majority trying to exercise more power over the minority. And unfortunately, one of the ways to do so is to try to limit or suppress the religious freedoms. So I think a lot of work needs to be done in this world, and we cannot do it alone. We need to do it together. Thank you so much.
We do have a question from the chat. And I would say, I think your response has to be brief so that we could recognize others, but asking you to say something about, I've studied this for years now. That's why I'm prefacing it in this way, but could you say something about the different branches of Islam?
Yes, yes. So the majority of Muslims fall under the Sunni sect, which is basically the majority of Muslims in the world, and most of the so-called Muslim majority countries fall under the Sunni sect. Now, there is the Shiite minority, which is very prevalent and dominant, for example, in a country like Iran. And there are also some Shiite communities in other countries, like, for example, Iraq. You can have some Iraqi Shiite communities as well. They're definitely the minority. And there are still some of the ongoing, you know, push and pull dynamics or power dynamics, again, I've been hearing about that, for example, in a country like Bahrain, which is a Gulf Arab country, right? I have a friend who is Bahraini, and she's been talking about the uprising that took place there in 2011 as part of the Arab Spring uprisings. It basically happened because in that particular case, interestingly enough, the majority of people in this country were belonging to the Shiite sect, but they were dominated by a Sunni government that has been there for God knows how long, like more than 45 years or so, and limiting their own opportunities, visibility, and chances. So again, we can go back again full circle to the question of intolerance or the question of power dynamics and how that plays out across different sects. And I would assume that the same thing is applicable in other faith traditions as well.
Yes, yes. Okay, Bridget, would you?
Thank you. This has been a really informative and helpful presentation. I'm thinking it's a somewhat generalized question, but I feel like right now with the conflict in Gaza and other parts of the Middle East, culturally in the US, we have an unfortunate sort of hitting of Islamophobia versus anti-Semitism, sort of discourse, say on social media. And I'm wondering what thoughts you have about that, if there are, ways in which you break past, sort of those unfortunate polarizations.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a very important and very timely question. Whenever we have, really a disaster or a conflict on that scale, which is very unfortunate and ongoing as we speak, you see what I described in the presentation about the surge in Islamophobia, but also the surge to counter Islamophobia. It's very interesting. It's like a double-edged sword. You see some people harboring some kind of Islamophobic
So
sentiment.
we do it from a phone until.
Never happened before.
Can you kindly just mute yourself, please?
So we've powered out here on accident. The main computer powered out, and we're trying to fix it. So everything you started to answer, can you please be prepared to repeat?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for
It
letting
says
me know.
on site, so everyone that's actually on site is missed what you just said. So
Oh,
just
okay.
pardon, if you can just pause for a moment so we can all sync back up.
Okay, no worries. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure, no worries.
I wonder if
This way though, you can tell her that.
Join audio, you're right.
Through my phone also.
Well, I think, let's try.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Sahar, now can you hear me on the laptop?
Yes, I can hear you and see you very well.
We don't hear you real well, but we'll do what we can. I think all the remote people can hear you very well. So,
Okay, you want me to talk louder?
if you can, I guess.
Yeah, can you hear me now well?
Can I connect to the owl?
Yes.
Just 1 minute. I think we might be able to connect to the owl.
Sure, no worries.
Okay.
But do you
And do I
have owl
need to
technology
go?
on your laptop?
I have to go take
it on my phone.
just a minute. If I connect to the owl, I've got it on my phone. I've got here. Let me do this.
Are you connecting now?
No, just a minute. I've got it on my phone too,
Okay.
except my phone's off. Hold on. I'm gonna turn my phone back on. It's gonna take a minute.
Yeah, I think the owl's got it.
Oh,
Should be able to hear the speaker.
but I have to, so do I need to connect
Yes.
to Zoom? But don't I need to connect Zoom on the owl?
You're already on.
We don't have a host now, though.
Yeah, we do. It automatically went to Carol as the
Okay.
host.
Okay, sorry. Connect, allow. Okay. But
Speaker? Yeah, go down here. The audio.
that's not it. It's the Zoom audio, isn't it? Ah, this is such a. Everybody should.
Yeah, we all know, yeah.
I don't know. Is there an owl connection I need to make?
It's got BHPC out.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's good.
but
Yeah.
Right, that's true.
Okay, what's on speaker here? Speaker should be on meeting now. Yeah, it's on, everything is on.
okay, let's try. Would you say something?
Yes, sure. Can you hear me well now?
Yes.
Hey, awesome. That's great. That's great. That gave me a lot of time to think about answering the question.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was saying that this is a very important,
8 more minutes, so yes, go ahead.
this is a very important and very timely question in the midst of everything that's going on now, of course, in the Middle East. It's very sad and very unfortunate. And that becomes a very fertile environment, unfortunately, for the parallel rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in parallel. Right? So you see the surge in Islamophobia, people who are upset at what is going on in the region, they can start to have some Islamophobic sentiments which are discriminatory against Islam and Muslims, and they start to use all types of profiling and misrepresentation. And the same thing could be true for the Jewish community when people are upset with the actions of the state of Israel, and then they start to use maybe some anti-Semitic terms and terminologies as well. So we usually see the surge in both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in parallel when these types of conflicts surge in the Middle East region, unfortunately. But I would say that there is also a flip side of the coin. You know, like I said in the presentation about the double-edged sword, you can see a surge in Islamophobia, but you can also see a surge in solidarity, in this case with the Palestinian people and their plight. And I'm sure you have seen some of that in some of the protests by the young students on some of the university campuses. You have seen some of that maybe in the social media activism and campaigns and posts, especially by young people who are upset about the situation, and rightly so. And therefore, they start to express their solidarity with the not just Palestinian people, but with the Muslim communities at large. So you're really seeing this kind of double-edged sword effect I've been talking about before playing out in the midst of this conflict. We just have to be careful to avoid falling in the traps of using words or terminology which could be considered quote unquote Islamophobic or anti-Semitic when we express our feelings, sentiments, emotions, ideas, and opinions around this conflict. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is a responsibility we all have now more than ever. Michael Gibson had said that the U.S. election results appear sadly consistent with recent elections in other Western and Westernized countries that evidence a trend of intolerance toward minorities and rejection of the Enlightenment. When will things change and why? And why? Wouldn't we like to know? But go ahead. Perhaps you have an answer, Sahar.
If I had an answer, I would have been now a millionaire living on the Bahamas. That is the $1 million question. Absolutely. That's a $1 million question. I mean, I think many of us are still caught in this moment, like wondering why things are happening in this direction, why they're happening in that direction. But I always see things as an educator, as a university professor, coming down and boiling down again to education, right? I believe that people who are better educated are able to analyze these phenomena, understand the root causes, right? There is a book which is called Strangers in Their Own Land. I don't know if some of you have read this book. If you didn't, try to check it out. It is very useful. And it talks about the strangers in their own land.
Okay.
And
yeah.
it was like, a study done by an author. She went to some of the rural white communities in places like Pennsylvania and other parts of rural America, which are some of the places that have been more prone to elect, the Republicans rather than the Democrats. And she started to ask them why. Why? And they said, we feel that we are quote unquote left out. We don't feel like we are part of the public discourse anymore. People don't care about us. The Democratic Party is becoming more elitist. It does not reach out to us sufficiently. We are left out of the picture. Our own needs and demands are not taken into account. We are not even, quote unquote, respected. So I think it's important for the Democratic Party, and I voted as a Democrat. I'm not gonna, hide this fact in past elections, to have a moment of self-awareness and to think again, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What are we missing? What are we lacking? You know what I'm saying? It's important to be educated. It's important to have the knowledge, but it's also important not to be in an ivory tower, not to be detached from other segments of society who may not see things eye to eye with you. They might disagree with you. That does not make them less intelligent, less credible, less valid as human beings. So I think the Democratic Party has a moment where it really, really needs to do some kind of, rechecking and reconsideration and rethinking, and maybe a new strategy which is more encompassing of some of these categories that feel left out. Because if that is the case, I'm afraid that we're going to see this phenomena happening over and over again.
Thank you. We really are almost out of time. I have a couple of important announcements for us, but you have a question? Do you want to leave us with the question, or?
I think from Dr. comments, I think that you would probably be able to answer this briefly, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just because these questions are culminating in my mind to the question of what kind of most helpful acts of solidarity are you seeing, or that you finding most helpful of allies, and especially white allies, and particularly in relation to Bridget's question about dialogues, conversations that that are shifting towards that solidarity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, really, in the midst of the Muslim travel ban 1, Muslim travel ban 2, as much as this was a very, very difficult time for many Muslims, as you can imagine, we have also seen this wonderful, wonderful wave of solidarity and support from non-Muslims, people across the board, from different demographic profiles, different faith traditions, different races, ethnicities, you name it. I mean, they came up in big numbers. There have been marches and protests on the streets saying, Muslims belong here. This is also their country. This is also their land. There have been acts of reaching out to Muslim community, welcoming some of the immigrants who are coming in the country, helping some of the undocumented immigrants in some cases to start their legal immigration process, reaching out to mosques, and even attending some of the Friday prayers to show an act of love and solidarity with the Muslim community. So, I mean, it has been very touching. One of my sisters who has not been in the US before, she said, as much as I was horrified by things like Muslim travel ban 1 and 2, as much as I was touched by these acts of kindness and solidarity. And I think having dialogue circles like the one we are having right now, allowing people to talk and to converse and to exchange thoughts and ideas and to get to know each other is extremely important as well. And we will need it more moving forward, more than ever before. And one last thing, I've seen a comment in the chat, like, if Islam is so accommodating for women and giving them a lot of rights and so on, why isn't the situation of Muslim women in many Muslim majority countries better than what it is now? I did not see the whole question, but I assume that's the gist of the question. And that is a question I always get asked. And the answer, again, goes to the point about tradition versus religion. When many countries adopt certain negative social practices across one generation to the next generation to the next generation, it impacts women in this country at large. For example, I am Egyptian American. In my home country, Egypt, you have a Muslim majority and you have a Coptic Christian minority of about 10 million people. you will see the practice, the negative practice of female genital mutilation done to young girls in both communities, the Muslim and the Coptic, equally in rural areas and areas in Upper Egypt. Why? Because it became, quote unquote, part of the tradition, right? So it's no longer something related to the religion as much as it's related to the tradition. And the same thing could be said about, a group like Taliban in Afghanistan banning women from education or from going to school or imposing, the burqa or a certain type of dress and so on. The list can go on and on and on. So I always say it's important to look at the root causes. Where is this coming from? Is it coming from the religion itself and its teachings, or is it coming from the wrong misinterpretation of the religious text combined with negative traditions that have been passed on from one generation to the next?
Thank you so much. We really do. I was thinking with you, Sahar, this has just been so excellent. And I think that we're hearing that the image of God with us bears a responsibility to act, to be, to reach out and be with each other. We will not be meeting next week because we will be having an interfaith trialogue as part of our worship service, followed by a brunch. You do need to register for the brunch, and we do need help to get ready. That was why we decided not to meet next week, because this involves a whole church effort. The following Sunday, Rabbi Abbott will be meeting with us to discuss how we can recognize and combat anti-Semitism. As Sahar, though, has been so eloquent and helpful, and as a lifelong educator, we can't give up. Education, reaching out, recognizing who we are and the love that we can show with each other is what we have to continue to do. And we have actually, Adult Ed met on Wednesday after the election and decided we will not have a full schedule so that we can be open to scheduling our needs and in response to what will be happening, starting with the inauguration. So thanks for being with us. Remember that a sense of humor does help, and being with each other. But Sahar has spent a lot of time preparing us and being with us. And we thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol, once again. Thank you all very much for being such a wonderful audience, listening and asking very insightful, important questions and making important comments. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you in this beautiful community, and I'm looking forward to more opportunities in the future. Thank you and stay blessed always.
Thank you, Sahar.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
So